Re d'Italia was the lead ship of the Re d'Italia class armored frigates built in the United States for the Italian Regia Marina in the early 1860s. She was laid down at the William H. Webb Shipyard in New York in November 1861, was launched in April 1863, and was completed a year later in September 1864. The two Re d'Italia class ships were the only Italian ironclads built in the United States. The ships were broadside ironclads, armed with a battery of 6 72-pounder guns and 32 164mm guns. Re d'Italia initially served as the flagship of the Italian fleet, though she was replaced by the turret ship Fondator shortly before the Battle of Lissa in 1866. During that battle, Re d'Italia was at the center of the melee. After her rudder was disabled by an Austrian vessel, the Austrian flagship Erzherzog Ferdinand Max rammed her and tore a large hole in her hull. Re d'Italia quickly rolled over and sank, taking some 400 of her crew with the ship, including her captain, Emilio Faa di Bruno. Design: Re d'Italia was 99.61 meters long overall. She had a beam of 16.76 meters and an average draft of 6.17 meters. She displaced 5,610 metric tons normally and up to 5,869 at full load. Her hull was built from green wood. She had a crew of 565. The ship's propulsion system consisted of one single expansion steam engine that drove a single-screw propeller, with steam supplied by four coal-fired, rectangular boilers. Her engine produced a top speed of 10.6 to 10.8 knots from 1,812 to 1,845 indicated horsepower. She could steam for about 1,800 nautical miles at a speed of 10.5 knots. For long-distance travel, Re d'Italia was fitted with 3 masts and was bark-rigged. Re d'Italia was a broadside ironclad, and she was armed with a main battery of 6 72-pounder 8-in guns and 32 164mm rifled muzzle-loading guns. The ship was equipped with a spur-shaped ram at the bow. The ship's hull was sheathed with wrought iron armor that was 4.75 in thick. Her rudder and propellers, however, were not protected by her armor. Service history: Re d'Italia was built by William H. Webb at his shipyard in New York City. She was laid down on the 21st of November 1861 and launched on the 18th of April 1863. The ship arrived in Italy in April 1864 and was commissioned into the Italian fleet on the 18th of September 1864. Less than 2 years later, in June 1866, Italy declared war on Austria as part of the Third Italian War of Independence, which was fought concurrently with the Austro-Prussian War. The Italian fleet commander, Admiral Carlo Pellion di Pisano, initially adopted a cautious course of action. He was unwilling to risk battle with the Austrian navy, despite the fact that the Austrian fleet was much weaker than his own. Pisano claimed he was simply waiting on the ironclad ram of Fondator, en route from Britain, but his inaction weakened morale in the fleet, with many of his subordinates openly accusing him of cowardice. Rear Admiral Wilhelm von Tegethoff brought the Austrian fleet to Ancona on June 27 in attempt to draw out the Italians. At the time, many of the Italian ships were in disarray. Several ships did not have their entire armament, and several others had problems with their engines. Regia Italia had a fire burning in her coal bunkers. Persano held a council of war aboard the ironclad Principe di Carignano to determine whether he should sortie to engage Tegetthoff, but by that time, the Austrians had withdrawn, making the decision moot. The Minister of the Navy, Agostino de Pretis, urged Persano to act and suggested the island of Lissa, to restore Italian confidence after the defeat at the Battle of Custis of the previous month. On the 7th of July, Persano left Ancona and conducted a sweep into the Adriatic but encountered no Austrian ships and returned on the 13th. Battle of Lissa. On the 16th of July, Persano took the Italian fleet out of Ancona, bound for Lissa, where they arrived on the 18th. With them, they brought troop transports carrying 3,000 soldiers. The Italian warships began bombarding the Austrian forts on the island, with the intention of landing the soldiers once the fortresses had been silenced. In response, the Austrian navy sent the fleet under Tegetthoff to attack the Italian ships. At the time, Regia Italia was Persano's flagship in the 2nd Division, along with the ironclad San Martino and the coastal defense ship Palestro. After arriving off Lissa on the 18th, Persano sent most of his ships to bombard the town of Vis, but he was unable to effect the landing. The next morning, Persano ordered another attack. 4 ironclads would force the harbour defences at Vis, while Regia Italia and the rest of the fleet would attempt to suppress the outer fortifications. This second attack also proved to be a failure, but Persano decided to make a third attempt the next day. Regia Italia and the bulk of the fleet would again try to disable the outer forts in preparation for the landing. Before the Italians could begin the attack, the dispatch boat Esploratore arrived, bringing news of Tegetthoff's approach. Persano's fleet was in disarray. The 3 ships of Admiral Giovanni Vacca's 1st Division were 3 miles to the northeast from Persano's main force, and 3 other ironclads were further away to the west. Persano immediately ordered his ships to form up with Vacca's, first in line abreast formation, and then in line ahead formation. Regia Italia was the 4th ship in the Italian line, behind only Vacca's ships. Shortly before the action began, Persano decided to leave Regia Italia and transfer to Affondatore, though none of his subordinates on the other ships were aware of the change. They were thus left to fight as individuals without direction. More dangerously, by stopping Regia Italia, he allowed a significant gap to open up between Vacca's 3 ships and the rest of the fleet. Tegetthoff took his fleet through the gap between Vacca's and Persano's ships, though he failed to ram any Italian vessels on the first pass. The Austrians then turned back toward Persano's ships, and took Regia Italia, San Martino, and Palestro under heavy fire. The Austrian ships concentrated the fire on Regia Italia, paying particular attention to her stern. In their attempts to ram her, one of the Austrian ships destroyed Regia Italia's rudder, leaving her unmaneuverable. Regia Italia's captain, Emilio Di Bruno, attempted to escape from the melee, but he could only steer his ship using her engines. Blocked by another Austrian ironclad, Di Bruno ordered his ship to reverse course. She was almost stopped when she was rammed by the Austrian flagship Erzherzog Ferdinand Max. The Austrian ships rammed a gaping hole in Regia Italia's hull. She quickly rolled over to port and sank. Out of her crew, only 166 men were saved. The remaining 400 went down with the ship, including Di Bruno.